Can y'all hear me? Sí, oye, ¿verdad? Okay. I was going to bring my hat to see if there might be some tricks in it that I could pull out, but that's not the case. What you see is what you get. And someone would say, well, I don't see much. When you hear me, you may say, we didn't get much either. But I really appreciate the presentation that we just had from Marty Castro. I could have, I would have yielded my time for him to continue because it's so good to, what he did was so important. When you get to my stage in life, you just hope that people remember what happened before. A lot of times we have a sense of the present and not a greater sense of the past. And the past has gotten us here. A lot of blood has been shed. A lot of tears have been cried. And many, many frustrations, difficulties that have had to be overcome to get us to where we are today. We're in much better shape today, despite what you see and hear. It seems like the worst of times for us, but there were times, I suppose we can argue, that were even worse. And the fact that these, like that slide that Marty put up with his dad, and Arturo Velázquez, and Art, and Irene Hernandez, and Judge Cerda, those are real pioneers. Real pioneers. And one thing that I would just add to that, not that he needs any help, but one of the things that they organized around was in 1960, they formed one of the first Viva Kennedy clubs in the United States. Y'all might remember when John F. Kennedy ran for president, Viva Kennedy clubs sprung up, largely around the Southwest, but in the Midwest, there was one club, and it was formed here in Chicago by these very same people. And in fact, Dr. Jorge Prieto, some of y'all hopefully will remember. If you don't remember who he was, ask your parents or grandparents. He probably delivered them when they were born because he became, already? Damn. I'm sorry, this is like TV. I forget, I think I'm in my office. But he became a naturalized citizen so that he could vote for John Kennedy. But let me just move on here then, in the interest of time, and I was glad to see Maximo here again with his dad, because I know Marty probably doesn't care that I say this, doesn't want me to say this, but I met Marty when he was about Maximo's age, back 35 years ago, almost 35 years ago when I met his father. Marty was about Maximo's age, and like Ray took Marty, Marty takes Maximo. And that's the way we create una cultura electoral. That's how we create una cultura electoral. Y si más Latinos mexicanos lo hicieran, if more Mexicanos did that, to where their parents take their children with them to meetings like this, to go and register to vote, to go and vote, we begin to create that cultura electoral que hace mucha falta in our community. I hope it's okay with y'all if I switch in and out. But it's just, that's what's really lacking. You look at other countries in Latin America to which we are often compared, and voter turnout exceeds 80%. They say, well, what happens to us in the United States? Es que en esos países, en lugares como la Isla del Encanto de Puerto Rico, es que politics is a way of life. It's passed on from one generation to the next. They live and breathe politics and elections. And if we did it here, more of us would be registered to vote, and more Mexicanos would be registered to vote today. As my children went with me, my 4 children, and they all had to report to me. I wasn't a precinct captain, but they thought I was. And on election day, they had to call Dad and say, Papa, I voted today. I said, okay, Mijo, And now my grandchildren call me because my children took them to go with them to register and vote. And now they call me and say, Papa, I voted today. Attaboy, And that's how you create una cultura electoral where one generation educates and trains the next. Just fast forward here. what if all Mexicans voted? I thought, I didn't make the connection. I didn't know that's where the connection came from about a day without Mexicans, but the same thought hit my mind. This topic for tonight sounds a little bit like that, and it's quite appropriate. And whoever came up with that, I want to commend them for that. But obviously, there's others that will follow. Is that really, that's not mine, is it? Okay, turn it face down. Okay? It makes me nervous when I look at it. It says she's holding up 1 minute. I haven't even started yet. But if Mexicans voted, imagine what could happen in this country. In Texas today, there's 250,000 veterans who have served this country in the military, and they're not registered to vote, and almost all of them are Mexicanos. What if they registered and turned out to vote? You wouldn't have the folks, the right-wingers that we have today coming down on our community across the border there in the state of Texas. And just one thing, one example, in California, with Alex Padilla having a chance to be elected Secretary of State if Mexicanos registered and voted. Antonio Villaraigosa would not have lost his first race for mayor had Mexicanos turned out to vote. The number that did not vote was very different from the number by which he lost. If even a fraction of those who didn't vote had turned out to vote, he would have won the first time and not the second time. Here in Illinois, where there's a tight race between Dick Durbin and the ice cream man, who doesn't like Mexicanos. So not even his chocolate ice cream tastes good now. If Mexicanos turned out to vote in Chicago, in Illinois, Durbin would be a slam dunk. And those kind of things can happen, could happen. And what could happen in American politics if Mexicanos registered and voted, it's almost like a dream. And you don't want to wake up from it, but we have to wake up and face the truth, face reality. Because there's also a dark side. There's a backside to all of this, and I would just caution you about that. Not to take any air out of this festive occasion, but one thing that I learned over the last 45 years of doing this is that we talk too much. And when we're going to do something big, we go tell everybody. And I remember 30, 40 years ago, if we were going to have a registration campaign to register 5,000 Mexicanos, we would go out and register 5,000 Mexicanos, and we felt great about it. And then election day, nothing changed. What happened? Well, those who don't like Mexicans knew what we were doing, so they went to register 5,000 more who didn't like Mexicans. Y se acabó. And it wasn't, and to say that it was a wash, it's an understatement. It really got worse. Because all those who did not like Mexicans turned out to vote. Many of ours didn't turn out to vote at all. Ganaron peor. They beat us even worse than the first time before we registered 5,000. So you can't waste time and energy and resources in registering 5,000 and telling the world, because they also have the same resources and even more to go and offset what you're doing. So what do? We go and register every Mexicano in the city of Chicago and in the state of Illinois and across America, and we don't tell anybody about it. We just don't tell. It's important that we remember that we know that we try to keep our eye on what we're doing and follow that, because it didn't just begin now. Just like with Marty's dad, Ray, 40 years ago, was working in the southeast side of Chicago. This work started long decades and decades and decades ago. And so I'm saying that to just say this: study your history. There are trends that we can follow now. USHLI itself publishes what we call the Almanac of Latino Politics. And if you've never read it, all you got to do is look it up. It gives you a 40-year history of how our population has grown over every decade over the last 40 years. How we have voted in every presidential election over the last 40 years. How we have voted in every off-year presidential election over the last 40 years. In other words, what I'm saying is there's no need to make up numbers. There's no need to make up numbers and tell people we're going to do all of this, because if you don't base that on research, then you're just setting us up to fail. And that's what happened last presidential election. The bar was set so high that the only thing that was imminent was failure. There was no way in the world, I could guarantee you, after over 40 years of doing this, that we could not possibly register as many people as we said we were going to register. It's never been done before, and it didn't happen last time. And so what happens? We didn't register as many as we thought, as many as had said that we're going to be registered. Oh, I guess Latinos or Mexicanos are apathetic. Is that the problem? Now it's our problem. Why? Well, the problem was what was predicted was unrealistic, and we couldn't step up and match that. So when the results came in, and they saw the money that was poured in to support voter registration, and the work and what was done, the results didn't change. We fell short in the results. All the money was spent. We looked bad. We don't need to look bad. We just need to be realistic about what we can do and set our minds to do it and go out and do it. And don't tell anybody that we're doing it. Háganlo en silencio. Do it undercover, tú sabes. Under the radar screen. At night if necessary. And register people to vote. That's extremely, extremely important. I remember, to close on this, that when I started with John Lewis 42 years ago, he's now a congressman, has been for 30-some years. But we had a poster that we used because most of our work was concentrated in the South, the old Confederacy, to register African Americans. John Lewis expanded that work to Texas to register Mexicans, and that's how I got involved with John Lewis. But they had a poster that showed blacks, showed African Americans picking cotton. And it said that hands that used to pick our cotton can now pick our elected officials. It's something that just resonated conmigo, because we too have done our share of the work. And we too can have a hand in electing our public officials, going forward. There's a lot of work that remains to be done, and we can do it. We need, like Marty was saying, to get involved in this. We need more volunteers. USHLI has registered 2.2 million new voters. Here in Chicago alone, all I have is college students who come in, and we send them out to naturalization ceremonies. They register as many newly naturalized citizens as they can on the run, because they don't stand around and wait for you to register them to vote, because they're excited and they want to go out and have lunch and celebrate. And we're saying, wait a minute, we got to register to vote. Ya vamos con ellos por la banqueta, just walking down the sidewalk with them. And it feels that, so where do you live? Where do you live? And just doing that in the summer for 10 weeks, for the last, since 2006. Now 8 years, or how long ago? That's 8 years. Those students have registered 136,000 newly naturalized citizens. Never said a word about it. Didn't tell anybody. We did not submit a proposal, to raise money to support voter registration. We just went out and did it quietly. Quietly. Silencio is the word. Because we can talk a lot, we can say a lot, but as we've learned over the years, when all is said and done, more was said than done. So no digan nada, nomás háganlo y aviéntense, ¿ok? Gracias por todo.